Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. So my guest this morning is Congressman Tom Suozzi. And Congressman, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me on.
We're thrilled to have you. And, we want to talk about a number of things this morning, but one thing, close to our heart, we want to, congratulate you on being named as the co-chair of the Congressional Labor Caucus. And, that's something that's important for us, knowing that we have a New York representative that's, working in that capacity. But can you tell me a little bit about, what that means? What type of work can you get done and the importance of the work that you do on that committee?
Well, it's a great honor to serve as one of the co-chairs of the Labor Caucus. And the goal of setting this up was really to get all the Democrats, whether you're the most progressive or the most moderate Democrat, all working together on behalf of labor. We should be able to find a unified voice among Democrats on the issue of labor. When I was growing up, it was that the Democrats were for the working men and women and the Republicans were for the fat cats. And those lines have been blurred over the years. And we need to get the Democrats back known as the party of working men and women. I think under this president, President Biden, who says, I'm a union man, that we can get back there. We take for granted labor unions in New York. It's commonplace for us. But in the rest of the country, labor unions are under assault. In New York, just about every public employee is in a union. But in America, only 20% of public employees are unionized. That includes, civil servants, that includes teachers, that includes anybody you can think of in public service in municipal work. Only 20% are in unions. And nationwide, only 7% of all employees are in labor unions. So in New York, it's like 20-something percent when you include all the different types of unions.
Sure.
But nationwide, it's only about 7%. So we need to do a much better job in our country of reestablishing labor. Why? Because too many people are working very hard these days, and they're actually in poverty, even though they go to work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year. So we've got a big problem in our country with working men and women making enough money so they can live the American dream.
Sure. And do you feel that to some extent, these right to work sounds like a really nice phrase, but in practice actually is not very pro-worker? And do you feel like these right to work laws are, contributing to the shrinking of the middle class, the shrinking of unionisms in general? Because we do see an uptick in younger people really having positive pro-union mindsets. Right
to work laws were done to undermine unions. And as unions have become undermined and as less people are in unions, we see the middle class shrinking in our country. I mean, I was born in 1962. And in the 1980s, we went through this whole thing with the fighting with the Japanese and the Germans over the car companies. And everybody said, we got to change things. We got to change things in America. And we did change things. And we focused less on workers and more on shareholders. And we've produced enormous wealth in our country. There's no question about it. Since the end of the 1980s, the Dow Jones has gone up 1,500%, and the gross domestic product has gone up 800%, 8 times, 15 times for the Dow Jones. But workers' wages have gone up less than 20%. So we're producing enormous wealth, but we're not sharing it with working men and women. And, in my family, the idea is, the American dream is, you work hard, and in return for working hard, you make enough money so you can have a house, you can educate your kids, you can have health insurance, and you can retire one day without being scared. Well, too many people go to work every day, and they can't do those things. I mean, the minimum wage in America, it's higher in New York, of course, but the minimum wage in America is $7.25 an hour. Let's say it's $10 an hour. $10 an hour, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year is only $20,000 a year. You're going to buy a house? You're going to have health insurance? You're going to put money away for your retirement? I don't think so. $15 an hour is $30,000 a year at 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. So, too many people are going to work, working hard, trying their best. Some people are working 2 jobs. They're working 60 hours a week, and they just can't make it. So we've got to figure out in our country how we're going to change our attitude so that when we produce this wealth, we're sharing it with the men and women who go to work every day. And like I said, I think that when President Biden talked about Build Back Better and, try and restore the middle class, that's the things he's talking about. And so I'm happy to be part of that effort as one of the co-chairs of the Labor Caucus. And the Labor Caucus is a very diverse group of people, and the labor movement is very diverse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
People don't realize, the public employee unions are very different than the building trade unions. And the building trade unions are very different from the healthcare workers. And they're very different from the hospitality workers. And they're very different from the car manufacturers and the steel workers. So the union movement is very diverse. And we need to bring the union movement together. We need to bring the Democrats together and hopefully bring the American people together to fight for working men and women again.
Absolutely. I agree. And, the one thing these labor movements all have in common is that they fight for all working people. It's not just about one particular union. It's about working people in general. I saw online a ridiculous claim that I just feel like I have to comment on. And they say, well, if we want to pay our fast food workers a fair wage, then your $5 burger is going to go up to like $17 or something like that. And the fact of the matter is that these fast food workers being properly compensated, it's not that they produce one burger an hour and that's where the $5 comes from. They produce multiple, and it is a smoothed over increase. And if you were to say we could pay Americans a fair wage and your costs would only go up, by pennies, I think most Americans would be completely on board with that. But the message gets very confused by, high-powered think tanks that really, they really do want to suppress not just labor unions, but workers in general, and keep that divide as much as possible. So I really do want to applaud you on your role, co-chairing the Labor Caucus, and really taking these issues very seriously and looking at them on a national level in a way that, can raise all working people.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's just talk about those fast food workers for a second, okay?
Yeah.
How can it be that somebody goes to work 40 hours a week and works 50 weeks a year and gets 2 weeks of vacation, and they got to get food stamps, or they got to get their health insurance from Medicaid? It doesn't make sense. So, it can't just be that the company's only goal, in the old days, before the 1970s, the company had a responsibility not only to its shareholders, but to its community, to its employees, to the consumer, to all these different stakeholders, varying degrees at very different times.
Right.
The idea it's got to be that the profits of the company are also being shared with the workers. Right. That's only fair. Now, the critics will say, well, you can't. If you're not worth the money, you're not going to get the money. Well, we got to challenge with that too. We got to figure out how you can get more skills to employees as well, because the more you learn, the more you earn. So there's going to be, people talk about like artificial intelligence. They're going to do more cashiers are going to be, self-checkout.
Right.
You see that a lot of places these days. You're going to see more and more stuff happening on computers at fast food restaurants probably as well. You're going to see more robotics as time goes on in factory. You're going to see more, self-driving cars they talked about.
Sure, yeah.
So the bottom line is we've got to be prepared for that. And a big challenge that we have is that we've been saying for the past, always I've been in service, but the past 30 years, go to college, go to college, go to college. And you should go to college. I mean, I encourage my kids to go to college. I went to college. You should encourage people to get an education. But 60% of Americans do not graduate from college. Does that mean they should have a miserable life? Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody's suited to go to college. Not everybody can afford to go to college, whatever the reason may be.
Right.
We have to start lifting up people who do not have college degrees. We have to start treating them with respect and get back to the concept of the dignity of work and the dignity of every human being. And so we need to do more apprenticeship programs where you can start earning while you're learning. But it's not learning sitting down in a classroom, because that's not everybody suited for that, but learning on the job how to become someone skilled. And it's not just the building trades, but the building trades do a great job with this. The
Yes.
electricians, the plumbers, the steam fitters, but also computer machinists, radio frequency operators, quality control experts, warehouse people. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we need to be recognizing. Not everybody's going to go to college, and we got to start, especially on Long Island where we are.
Sure.
Right. Not everybody's going to go to college.
Yep.
We got to get the BOCES program to be respected again in community colleges and
Right.
interweave all these different. When a company says, I need 5 people to operate this type of machinery, we need the community colleges and BOCES and these different not-for-profits and government agencies to say, oh, we'll train you 5 people like that. And then somebody can make a decent wage. Anyway. So.
Yeah. No. Listen, and that's all a fair point, and it really just circles back around. I mean, COVID really was something that, globally had a big impact everywhere, and there was like a financial aspect to it. It was the health aspect. But one of the things most interesting to me, and would be no surprise, given my position in the world, is what it means to be an essential frontline worker. And 2 years ago, that wouldn't have been a grocery store worker. That would not have been, the first thing someone guessed. But the fact of the matter is, the food supply, the basic necessities of life really became very much as essential as the healthcare industry. And, it's definitely my hope in the future that we don't forget how important these folks are and begin to, as a society, devalue them and therefore the worth of their labor, because it was necessary to keep this country running, to have that whole food supply system running the way it needs to, from growing it to picking it to, canning or boxing or whatever, shipping, and then getting it out in the stores and having it available for sale. Just as important as having the healthcare system up and running for the health and safety of this country. And
I agree with you, Dan. It really comes back to just treating everybody with worth. And so, it's a challenge. We've got 2 great systems in America. We've got capitalism, best system in the world, produced more wealth, lifted more people out of poverty, more innovation, great system. And then we got democracy. All men and women are created equal. These 2 systems have to work together with each other. So in our capitalist system, we say the smarter you are, the harder working you are, the luckier you are, the stronger you are, the more risk-taking you are, the more competitive you are. In a society based upon competition, the better you're going to do. Okay?
Right.
Some people, though, are terrible competitors. Some people, babies are bad competitors.
Right.
Senior citizens are sometimes when they get frail are bad competitors. People with mental health issues are bad competitors, or people with a physical disability, or somebody who just got unlucky, someone in an accident, someone who's diagnosed with a bad disease.
Right.
There's just some people are not smart. We all went to school. Some people are smarter than other people. It's just the way of the world.
Sure.
So in a system based upon competition, some people are going to do really well, and some people are not going to do well because they're just not as good a competitor. So we have another system. We say, okay, all men and women are created equal. Let's make sure that even if you're a bad competitor, you're not going to have a miserable life. We don't want you to be homeless. We don't want you to be hungry. We don't want you to be living out in the streets. We don't want you to be struggling every single day of your life to just exist.
Right.
So we got to try and put some protections in place that say, let's treat people like human beings, regardless of how good a competitor they are. Well, if you do, so you got to find a balance, though. If you do all capitalism, you end up with a bunch of people doing great and some people doing really terrible. If you do too much, all men and women are created equal, and you put too many rules in place, you kill the economic engine that created the great economic system that is capitalism. You got to find a balance between those 2 things,
right?
So that you can keep the economic engine going, but you can treat people with dignity and respect. So that's the balance. It's not all this or all that. Everybody wants to these days. It's all this or it's all that. You're either a socialist or you're a capitalist, or you're a Black Lives Matter, or you're a Blue Lives Matter, or you're a this or you're a that. It's never that.
Right.
It's a balance. I'm pro police. I was a mayor, as a county executive. I'm pro cop. Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm for some reforms too. I don't want people treated like crap because of the color of their skin. And so we got to be conscious of that. So you can be both of those things.
Right. Yeah. So, well, I guess speaking on balance, just in general, I think the next thing we can get into is the American Recovery Act, and talking about how through federal aid, there was some balance restored to states and localities across the country, which
Thank
is
God.
was a huge deal for us, something that we lobbied for quite a bit, and we had our members writing letters, and we talked about it ad nauseum. But one, I want to thank you for your efforts in making that happen. Suffolk County received more than $286 million in direct aid, which is essential, and just to put that in context for you, to help you understand where I'm coming from. There was a $75 million hole in the Suffolk County budget.
Oh, I know the whole story. The whole story.
And we did not want to see the services that the public relies on, that our members provide, go to the wayside. And so, again, just a great big personal thank you, and thank you on behalf of my members.
Well, listen, that was my big issue. I've got two big things that are really at the top of my priority. Number one was fighting to get state and local aid, bringing money back to New York as part of this. And it was a very tough fight because there were a lot of people that didn't want to help us, And they said, oh, come on, you guys, what's with New York? You can open up fast to do this. I said, well, you didn't have refrigerator trucks full of bodies. I said, we're people are traumatized here in New York. And, we're coming back, but people are still in the back of their minds are saying, oh, I don't want to go back to that again. So we took a huge hit. And the reason the counties were so badly hit and the state was so badly hit and the city of New York was so badly hit is because sales taxes went down so dramatically.
Sure.
People still pay their property taxes. We did okay with income taxes because Wall Street guys made so much money. But the reality is that sales taxes went down dramatically. And that's why the counties were particularly hard hit. And I'm a former county executive. I know all about that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was my big priority. My other big priority is the next fight that I'm in right now, which is to get the state and local tax deduction back. That was a body blow to us in New York. That hurt. That was purposely done to hurt blue states, and it hurt us badly. The idea that you can deduct your state and local taxes from your income taxes at the federal level was capped at $10,000. Well, we know on Long Island people pay a lot more than $10,000 in their property taxes and their state income taxes, and that was a real hit to us. So I'm always fighting to bring money back to New York because New York is the biggest net donor to the federal government. We send more money to the federal government in income taxes than we get back than any other state in the country. We're the biggest net donor to the federal government of any state in the United States of America. New Yorkers need to realize that. Americans need to realize that. And we need to get our fair share back. So I'm always fighting to get our fair share back to New York. And we're in trouble because when I was born in 1962, we had 45 members of Congress.
Right.
Because the South has grown, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Texas. We now have 27 members of Congress, and it's going down to 26 or 25 in the next census. So even though we're the biggest net donor to the federal government, we have less and less influence every year. That's why we had to fight so hard, if you remember back, to get money for 9/11.
Yes.
For Sandy, for the COVID relief just now, the SALT deduction. They're always trying to beat us up. Those same states that we talked about before that are the right-to-work states are the same states that are trying to hit us all the time, and it's like they resent us. Even though we're the biggest cash cow for the country, they're always beating up on New York. So we got to fight for New York, fight for our fair share. Now getting the SALT deduction is my next big fight.
No, and listen, I agree. That's, the SALT deduction happens to be one of those issues that I can talk to people about that isn't a partisan issue, right? No matter what political party they're affiliated with, they want the SALT deduction. And again, you talk about New York State being a donor state to the federal government and how these other states then take all of that, additional revenue as an add-on to what, like they're getting our money to achieve their goals.
Right.
And then standing in the way of us, achieving our goals.
And when we get our money, we got to fix old roads and old bridges and old sewers and old hospitals and old schools. When they get the money, they're building new roads and new bridges and new sewers and new hospitals, and they're beating the crap out of us. We're subsidizing our own demise.
Yes.
So we got to fight for New York all the time. And I'm going to need your help because what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start doing a campaign to show people the type of people that are hit by this cap on the SALT deduction. I mean, I need examples of guys, a husband and wife. Maybe the one's making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, and the other one's making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, but they're making $140,000 in their household. but they got taxes of property taxes of 12 or 13 or 14,000, and then they got income taxes on top of that of another $7,000. These people are hit hard.
Yes.
Now, when I talk to my colleagues and I say, a husband and wife are making $140,000 and they're living in a $400,000 house, I'm like, oh, they must be rich. I said, what are you talking about? I said, on Long Island, if you're making that kind of money, you're just paying your bills. They said, well, in Oklahoma, if you're making that kind of money, you live in a brand new house in a gated community with granite countertops. So there's a disconnect between what's going on in different parts of the country. So we got to keep on working on this stuff.
Yeah, and so my guest this morning is Congressman Tom Suozzi, and we are talking right now about the SALT tax deduction that remains a big issue. And, I guess two points there, kind of following this down the rabbit hole a little bit. On one end, it's not going to be too hard, as you ask for help, to find people in Nassau and Suffolk County that are greatly impacted by that.
Oh, no, I need people on Long Island, but I got to convince these guys in Oklahoma.
Well, there's me following it down the rabbit hole, right? So now Oklahoma is getting by, and they're doing all of these things, and they're getting new infrastructure, and it's almost implied, like, leave New York and go there, and you'll be better off. But the fact of the matter is, this cash cow, if it, to use the expression, being a donor state, if New York stops being a donor state, all of these welfare states, just to use that term, they're not going to have that money either, right? So there is a need for balance here in a way that is equitable across the board, and what New York's contribution is to the federal whole, the well-being of the country. It's got to be part of the conversation when we're talking about stuff like this.
And we need to convince, the people in our state, especially the more progressive people, that this is not about rich versus poor, okay? Yes, if we got the cap on the SALT deduction lifted and we went back to the full deduction, it would help people that make $200,000 a year or $300,000 a year or $500,000 or even $1 million a year. But we don't want those people leaving New York.
Right.
If they leave New York, we're left behind holding the bag.
Right.
Where we're either going to get our taxes increased or we're going to get our services cut, and we don't want that. We need those people in New York to help pay the bills.
I agree. And the bottom line is, again, like we were talking about earlier, and if I could summarize all of what we were talking about, it just all comes back to what you said, balance. Having that balance between the two systems of capitalism and democracy. We want to be fair to the people living and working in the state of New York. I am obviously very concerned about what's happening in Suffolk County, but the state of New York as a whole impacts things in Suffolk County. And then what is that net effect to the country and how that affects everyone? And really finding balance there, I think, is very important. There's one more issue I did want to get into. Something, again, I'm sure it'll be no surprise that I'm bringing it up to you, but that's the PRO Act, and I'd like to get into a little bit of what you see the PRO Act as, and maybe just discuss that for a bit.
Well, the PRO Act is an effort to try and make unionization attractive again in America, and it's to make it easier for unions to organize. Right now, there's a great thing going on in Alabama, of all places.
Yes.
Where we're trying to organize, the RWDSU is trying to organize Amazon workers in Alabama. And people are like, Alabama, what are you going to Alabama for? Well, there's a place called Bessemer Steel.
Yep.
Bessemer, Alabama, used to be home to Bessemer Steel, where they're trying to organize a Amazon warehouse. If that happens, it'll be a great thing. But listen, it's a right-to-work state. There are people working against it. And the PRO Act would say we got to make it easier for people to have free speech. And if you break the National Labor Relations Board rules, you're going to get a penalty for breaking those rules. Right now, it's just a slap on the wrist.
Right. And so someone like the folks that run Amazon who have resources and access to resources that these workers never will, can do everything they can to prevent these workers from having a seat at the table. And that's what a labor union seeks to be, is to be that voice at the table when your company's talking about, profitability, you need someone in the room to also talk about the people who make the thing that make the company profitable, and that there is a sense of fairness. There's that balance again that we talked about.
That's the balance.
It's not
balance,
just
right.
it's not just the capitalism of running a successful company. That should matter to labor leaders, but it should also matter that the people doing the work.
It'll be good for the whole country too, because the more money those workers make, the more they can buy Amazon products. I mean, the bottom line is, you need everybody to succeed. If we could all be part of this.
Sure.
If we balance it. Everybody's got to participate. Now, we've been through a big transition, okay, because we've gone through this whole thing with globalization and with all these different changes over the past 30 years. And it's kind of a new phenomenon, technology, globalism, it's all new. But now we're seeing the effects of it. We've seen too many people that have been left behind. And so now is the time to try and get our ship in order, get our house in order, and make sure that everybody in America is participating in the American dream.
I agree. And just one last observation. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. I find it slightly humorous when someone like Mitch McConnell, very much for the Citizens United ruling and everything else, is now out and publicly, telling corporations, you need to stay out of politics. And the voter suppression that they're trying for in various parts of the country, but specifically, I think he was talking about Georgia, and these corporations are now getting involved and saying, listen, we don't want to do business with a group in America that's trying to suppress the rights of Americans. And now, now you have this political figure that, has been speaking one way all along, saying, oh, wait, no.
Free speech, right?
Right.
Well, we need everybody to participate. I think the big challenge of our country these days is so many people are sick and tired of politics. The largest group of Americans is like 52% of them are politically disengaged and politically disenchanted.
Right.
They're just sick of the whole system. And we need more people to actually vote. We need people to actually vote in the primaries, especially the local primaries and the state primaries. We need people to participate because only 15% of registered Democrats, only 15% of registered Republicans vote in primaries, and they're often the most extreme. We need to get back to everybody participating. So,
sure.
The more people that participate, the better the system will be.
Yeah, and I wonder, I guess just another thought off the top of my head, so you've taken a particular position on SALT, right? And you've said, listen, I in order for me to vote yes on something, it's got to have this SALT position in it. And I wonder if sometimes a political person, whether it be in your position or anywhere throughout the system on the local level all the way up, they take a position and they say a thing like, hey, I need this in order to vote yes. And then sometimes that thing ends up in the bill, but the rest of the bill is so bad that you have to then vote no, and then people feel like they've been duped. Or, like saying, if this is in, like I can't vote yes unless this is in. That also doesn't mean that you can't vote no. I guess, like I'm trying to find the best way to say it. But
it's a hard thing to say, but that's what politics is. I mean,
right.
It's balancing all these different things. It's never as people say, oh, you ought to just. Well, it's never you ought to just. I mean,
right.
Nothing simple as that. Everything's a lot of moving pieces, very complicated issues, and it's a matter of finding a balance. And that's I've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm trained as a CPA, but I've been in public life for a long time, and it's a balance. And I'm just working hard for the people that I represent to try and make this better for them. And that's what I do as part of the Labor Caucus. That's what I do as a member of the Ways and Means Committee. That's what I do fighting for SALT, trying to bring money back to the state of New York, state and local funds, and getting the SALT deduction back. I'm just fighting for the people I represent, and that's what I'll keep on doing.
Well, Congressman, I certainly appreciate your time. I appreciate the efforts that you have put into all of this and just carving out some of these items that we needed to discuss and expanding on them. I just want to thank you for being a guest and continuing the great work you're doing.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week. Listeners, we'll speak to you next week. Listeners, we'll speak to you next week. Listeners, we'll speak to you next week.